Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wall Street for Main Street podcast. My name is Mo, and today's guest is a returning guest. We had him on a few times in the past. Is Dr. Mark Thornton. He is the senior fellow at the Mises Institute. Mark, thank you for coming back.
Hey, Mo, it's great to be on your program. Providing insight about Wall Street to the people on Main Street is a great public service that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We do our best to give people on Main Street the truth of what's actually going on in the market and the economy. And I'm going to start off the podcast by talking about a popular topic, and it's become popular due to the election and this one certain candidate that calls himself a democratic socialist, whatever that means. And because of him, it's given a rise to the rise of socialism among millennials in general. I just want to get your thoughts on why do you think the millennials are so attracted to the idea of socialism when history has shown that it hasn't worked out?
Well, Mo, socialism is this mysterious, almost godlike creature where everything is great and serene and peaceful and prosperous and everybody's getting along and doing fun things. But the reality of socialism is that it's a constant conflict between the state and the individuals and their choices and their preferences. And, of course, ultimately, the more socialistic an economy becomes or a state becomes, the less prosperous the economy actually is. And this has been proven theoretically by Ludwig von Mises, who showed that you have to have private ownership of property in order to have a rational allocation of resources that meets everybody's needs. And history has also proven that socialism, wherever and whenever and to whatever extent it's been tried, has been a failure. It's failed to meet the challenges, and everywhere it's been tried, those countries fall further and further behind the more capitalistic part of the world. Today, with Bernie Sanders running as an avowed socialist, a lot of people are attracted, particularly young people are attracted, because he's saying that everyone should get health care, everyone should have a free college education, and so he's in a state of giving away. He's in the Santa Claus state where he thinks he can give everything away. The truth of the matter is, however, that Bernie Sanders is not that far away from Barack Obama, who is a democratic socialist, and Hillary Clinton. And even I would go further that the Democrats and the Republicans are not that much apart. As George Wallace once said, there's not a dime's worth of difference between Democrats and Republicans. They're all interested in a big state with a big military, with a Federal Reserve. They only are tinkering with one another's policy positions at the edges. There's not that much difference, at least in effect. I mean, what the ultimate effect of Democrats and Republicans interacting is that there's not that much of a change. And what we've seen is that Democratic-Republican coalition, in effect, has led to bigger and bigger government over the last 100 years, where 100 years ago we had a very, very limited federal government where the average person wouldn't even come into contact with the federal government except for the post office. And now we've got, the government regulating our television sets. They're listening to our phone calls. They're manipulating money policy and interest rates. And they're definitely into our health care and our education and everything else. So it's a big mess, and hopefully these young millennials will be better informed about what socialism really is, and that capitalism is a system of voluntary interaction, progress, peace, and prosperity.
I think what attracts millennials to socialism, like what you said, is all the free stuff that they're going to get if they vote for him or Hillary Clinton or the other candidate. And that's free health care, free college, more leave, and pretty much government telling the companies how much leave that they should give to the employees and how much they should be uh, giving to the employees so they can make a decent living. And I think that's more attractive to the other side, which is capitalism, where it's voluntary and you have to work to what you want to get to, and that's not appealing to millennials for whatever reason.
Yeah, well, the reality is that the federal government has been giving away more and more stuff to people, drug benefits, health care benefits, all sorts of things in labor law. And what has ultimately happened is that wages in the American economy have been stagnant now for almost 2 decades. And so if we return to capitalism, we took away all these side benefits that are mandated by government, we would return to a more growth-oriented and more prosperous economy.
Now, there's a recent article posted by the Washington Post, and they did a poll, or I think Harvard did a poll, and they showed that the majority of millennials reject capitalism. Is it fair to say that capitalism has an image problem?
Yes, it does. I mean, the politicians blame everything on capitalism and say that they are the ones that are responsible for creating all sorts of benefits and rights. And so, capitalism doesn't have a publicity firm working for it like the Democrats and Republicans, who spend billions of dollars every year on promoting their causes and their image, when in reality the government doesn't give away anything. I mean, doesn't have anything to give. It's basically in the business of taking from some people and giving to others. And it's not necessarily taking from the rich and giving to the poor. It's very often taking from the poor and middle classes and giving to the rich. And so, there's also this problem of inequality that has been seized on by the political parties and the progressive ideologues. And there has been some growing inequality in the American economy, but this is primarily due to crony capitalism, where the politicians help their wealthy friends, not their poor friends, their wealthy friends. And also, of course, America had been becoming more equal throughout the 20th century. And then we went off the gold standard in 1971, and we've seen a skyrocketing of economic inequality in terms of income and wealth ever since.
And yeah, so people think bank bailout, the merger of corporation and government, they think that's capitalism, but it's actually crony capitalism, like you said.
Yes, I mean, it's, regulations, subsidies, government purchases, these all help the large corporations. The government doesn't buy toilet paper from, mom and pop grocery stores. And so the more government there is, the more crony capitalism you're going to get out there.
Right. And if people just look at what's going on in Venezuela right now, which is a socialist country, they'll see that, socialism is not good for society and for the economy. That long bread line, it's chaos right there right now, high unemployment, and a lot of it also due to low oil prices as well. So how could people want that here in the United States? I just don't get it.
Well, the problem is the media doesn't cover that story in Venezuela, where they've had a socialist government and a socialist dictator for, several years, many years, and the ultimate consequence of this socialist government is that basically the unemployment rate is extremely high. They have price controls, and the stores are basically empty of goods in the stores because nobody wants to sell things at a loss, which is what the government is trying to mandate. And so, it's very difficult, for example, to find toilet paper. You have to go to the black market in Venezuela to buy toilet paper and food. Of course, their currency is collapsing. Their economy is collapsing. Venezuela is a country that has one of the world's largest oil reserves, and yet it's impoverished to the nth degree.
I don't know if you saw this, but Bernie Sanders did a video a long time ago saying breadline is actually good for the economy. I don't know if you ever saw that video.
I did. It's quite remarkable. It's absolutely quite remarkable, the idea that bread lines are somehow good for the economy. Because I don't know if anybody else could make such a claim with a straight face, because a bread line is an indicator that people don't have enough to eat. They have to waste their time standing in line in order to get what is very often an insufficient quantity and a poor quality product. What Sanders was saying is that in capitalism, that the rich get all of the food and the poor get none of the food, and that the idea of a bread line is that everybody gets an equal shot at what's available. It seems preposterous, but that's his idea, that somehow bread lines are more fair. But it's wrong on many, many accounts, because in capitalism, free market capitalism, not crony capitalism, but free market capitalism, you get an ever-enlarging pie of economic goods and services. It's actually very sufficient to feed everyone in society, and that, you know, people really make money not by serving the wealthy, but by serving the average person, because there's not enough wealthy people to support a particular product out there. It's something, you know, capitalism is about mass production, and mass production is for production for the masses. And so Sanders' idea is just so wrong in so many ways, and even the whole idea that somehow the wealthy would be standing in a bread line is preposterous, because the wealthy Venezuelans, for example, they're not standing in bread lines. They're going to the black market, having people that they've hired go to the black market to procure anything that they want. So everything about Sanders' claim is really wrong.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of videos that raised my eyebrows about him. I've seen him praise Fidel Castro for what he'd done in Cuba, even though Cuba is one of the poorest countries in the world due to their communist state. Not like the other candidates are not saying any dumb things that they in the past, like Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. Donald Trump is mad Oil Cookie is moving their production to Mexico, but that has to do with government and their subsidy and tariff on sugar, because it's expensive here, more cheaper than in Mexico. So a lot of these candidates are saying really dumb things and misleading the public on why the economy is the way it is right now, in my opinion.
Yes, and you got to give Bernie Sanders some credit. He was against the war in Iraq.
Yeah.
That's very important, and he has stood up, at least in some sense, against crony capitalism. And so he's not all bad, but his economics are really bad. But we do need a candidate that emphasizes peace and staying out of foreign wars, and we need a candidate that promotes the idea of production and is not a Keynesian who thinks you can borrow and spend your way or print your way out of an economic recession. Printing money, low interest rates, and borrowing money from by the federal government and spending it is what got us into this mess. It's not what's going to get us out of this mess.
I agree with you. Now let's talk about the Federal Reserve, who's doing all the money printing for our country. They recently decided not to raise rates. I think they're kind of concerned that if they raise rates, the economy will kind of fall apart, as it's kind of unstable right now. I want to get your thoughts on what's happening with the Federal Reserve and the interest rate.
Well, you know, when I first started studying economics, and not even Austrian economics, it was pretty clear in the textbooks that any particular supply of money would be sufficient for an economy. And they also would rail against the mercantilist theory. And the mercantilists thought the more money you had in the economy, the better it would be, and you'd become wealthier. They thought money was wealth. Well, 200 years of economics destroyed that notion by the mercantilists that more money is a good thing. And yet now, I find myself in a profession of economists that now believe that money printing is salvation for the economy. And so all of that debunking has been lost. And mainstream economists are firmly committed to this idea that low interest rates and increases in the money supply will save us. Well, now they've had a chance to try that since 2007. They've increased the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve by many, many times its original amount. And they've increased the money supply enormously in the economy. They've kept interest rates below 1% now for many years. And it was less than 0.25 of 1% for a very long time until last December. So we have this historically untried theory in place in the American economy, and it'll have effects, but the effects are not economically rational, and ultimately they'll have very harmful effects on the American economy. So it's just amazing to me to have come into economics on this history where we learned our lesson, we debunked the mercantilists, and now we're right back to mercantilism and Keynesian economics, something that we thought we had dispelled in the 1970s when the Keynesians ruined the American economy. So it's a very, very unfortunate situation that we face ourselves in. We've printed tons of money. It hasn't saved us. The government has borrowed tons of money. It hasn't helped us. And right now, the Fed is in a situation where they have no idea what to do. They think that they can sort of fool their way with a con game or a confidence game to talk their way out of this problem. But now they find themselves faced with the idea that they tried raising the rate by 0.25%, and the economy and the stock market, had a severe reaction to all of that. So now they don't know what to do. They had planned to raise interest rates 4, 5, or 6 times this year, and they just recently announced yesterday that they have no plans on raising rates anytime soon. So that's a difficult situation, and I can tell you that the economists at the Federal Reserve have no idea what to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're short on ideas on what to do to try to improve the economy, but the truth is that they need to let the market decide the interest rate. And if you let the market decide the interest rate, it would be a lot higher than it is today. It would be painful short term, but long term we'll be better off. So I want to talk about something that you frequently write about and discuss on other podcasts, and that's the war on drugs. Now, you recently wrote an article on the heroin epidemics that's going on in this country. I think it's one of the unintended consequences of the war on drugs that's been going on in this country since the 1980s. So let's talk about the heroin epidemic. And we're going to talk about the war on drugs, even though it's not related to the economy or the market. But we are libertarians, and we want to promote the idea of liberty to our followers. So let's talk about that.
Absolutely, Mo. It is kind of compartmentalized, the war on drugs, but it really is about the economy as well. And it's very symbolic about what government intervention can do bad in a particular market, because the war on drugs has been a wholesale failure for the American public now for over a century. And but one thing I would say in general is this is a very optimistic place in our life, in the sense that, broadly speaking, the case for free markets and drug legalization is stronger and stronger today than it's ever been for the last over a century, basically. More and more people, for example, 60% of American adults believe that marijuana should be legalized. Several states have legalized it despite the conflict that raises with the federal government and the United Nations. So Americans are standing up against their higher levels of government and saying, we're not going to put up with it anymore. And so this is a great ideological and scientific turn of events that is wonderful news, and I believe it's something that's going to continue. The United Nations is meeting as we speak to rewrite the drug protocols, the guidelines, the UN guidelines for nation states, and it's my belief that they are going to liberalize those guidelines so that other countries around the world can liberalize their drug laws without coming into conflict with the United Nations. So this is a wonderful area. It's unfortunate that it's been mired with this heroin epidemic, which is sweeping the country. And in the 1960s and 70s, the face of the heroin epidemic was a minority junkie in the urban core of big cities. That, in more recent years, has spread out into the suburbs and into the high schools. And now it's spreading out into rural areas, small towns, away from the major cities. And thousands of people are dying from heroin, and they're also dying from prescription opiates, such as Oxycontin and Vicodin. And what I found when I researched this topic was that there are several things coming together that has caused this epidemic. Number one, the pharmaceutical companies have gotten the federal government and the AMA to change their pain relief guidelines. And so if you go to see a doctor and you've broken your arm, or you've thrown your elbow out, or you've been hit in the head at work, or you've had a sports accident, chances are the doctor is going to prescribe a prescription opiate like Oxycontin and Vicodin. But of course, these injuries go away, and the doctors have to take their patients off of these drugs. But that leaves, Oxycontin and Vicodin are chemically very, very similar to heroin. And so when these people are cut off from their prescriptions, they go to the black market for Oxycontin and Vicodin. And then they find that they don't have enough money for Oxycontin and Vicodin on the black market, because it can be anywhere from $10 to $25 a pill. So their next best choice is heroin, which is less than $10 a dose, sometimes $4 or $5 a dose if you buy in larger quantities. And so, the fisherman from Maine, the mine worker from West Virginia, the high school sports star from upstate New York, and so on, they get hurt, they go to the doctor, they get on Vicodin or Oxycontin, they get cut off, they try buying on the streets, and they end up with heroin and a heroin addiction. And all of those drugs can kill you, but of course heroin is made in the black market, and so users aren't really sure how much heroin they're really getting. It looks the same, like the same amount of powder, but they don't know how much heroin is in there or what other drugs might have been sneaked in there by the by the suppliers. And so this is a horrible situation. And, 10,000 or more people die of heroin overdoses, and 10,000 or more die of Vicodin and Oxycontin. So we're talking about more than 40,000 unnecessary deaths because of the drug companies, the government, the AMA, and the fact that heroin is illegal. And actually, marijuana is still a Class 1 drug, which means it comes with very heavy fines and penalties and imprisonment jail terms. And marijuana is something that is known to, or is at least thought to be, something that helps people get off of heroin addiction. So it's really just an awful, awful thing. And it's not just the addicts themselves, but of course you're harming their entire family and their friends as a result of this. And they're ruining lives. And it's just all unnecessary, really.
And I think the model that they should look to copy is what's going on in Portugal, which has decriminalized all drug use, and in result of that, the drug-induced deaths have decreased in Portugal, and also the rate of drug use amongst all adults has decreased. So if they want to look at a model that's actually working, they should look at what they're doing in Portugal.
Well, what I argue in my recent article is that legalization would be the real cure, so that heroin was produced in pharmaceutically based production with known doses, and of course marijuana would also be legal, so it would be easier to get off of heroin. Heroin, of course, once you're hooked on it, it's very difficult and painful to get off of. But marijuana, solves the problem of hunger and of nausea, of pain, and the ability to sleep. And so I think the legalization model works extremely well to solving the problems both of the drug war itself as well as drug addiction. Now, but Portugal is very, very instructive to all of this, because in Portugal, back in 1997, the country was in desperate straits in terms of the economy, as well as in terms of drug addiction and overdoses and so forth. And they just basically gave up, and they turned drug policy over to a private sector committee of doctors and social leaders, and they came back with the idea of decriminalizing all drug use, so that they would still arrest smugglers, but if you were found to have marijuana or heroin on you, or cocaine, in not in large amounts but in small amounts, you would be given a ticket, and you would have to appear in front of a committee of counselors, and they might ratchet up the penalties on you over time if you kept on getting caught. But basically, it made the drug safer. It made consuming the product safer. And Portugal went from one of the highest drug overdose rates to one of the lowest. And so when we've looked at the social indicators in Portugal, we've seen all of them improve, especially those that are related directly to drug use. And so by making it a medical problem rather than a legal problem, and offering people counseling instead of giving them prison terms, Portugal has found itself as a role model, and the UN Drug Task Force is headquartered in Lisbon, Portugal, and they've been observing this themselves, and that's why I'm so confident that this meeting at the UN is going to result in a more liberalized agenda worldwide, so that as libertarians, we can take enormous pleasure and some credit for finally coming up with a victory for personal liberty. As I see it coming forth over the next few years, and what we need to do is to make this just an example that getting government out of something and introducing commercialization, privatization, markets, property rights really solves a lot of our problems. And I think the next generation is going to look back and say, boy, you guys were stupid, but at least you realized you were stupid. And eventually, it took a long time, eventually you changed your mind towards liberalization and true capitalism, and a lot of great stuff came out of it. So we need to keep pushing, and we need to tell people that this is working, because it is, and that it's solving problems and it's making society a better place to be. And that's just one of the reasons why people are moving to states like Colorado, Washington, and Utah, because of the liberalization of marijuana laws. People are better off as a result. Crime is down, and drug use is actually down amongst the local people.
And that's all interesting points, and it'll be interesting to see what happens down the road regarding the war on drugs. Well, Mark, I know you have to go. Thank you for your time. If people want to find out more about what you do, where can they go?
Well, I want everybody to go to Mises.org, MISES.org. We've got lots of great stuff, a great blog, great daily articles. Everything's on there. It's a humongous website. There's audio and video lectures. We have a bookstore and just so much stuff. We have a Facebook page that's great. And we have some of the great young Austrian economists putting up their commentary about day-to-day events and important things that are going on in the economy. So go to our website, go to our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter at Mises, MISES, and my handle is at Dr. Mark Thornton. It's been a great pleasure, Mo, and thank you for having me on the air again.
Well, thank you, and hopefully you can come back on again soon.
You bet.